video, I will show you guys how to write an equation for linear function situation based on given table. So for this problem, you are given a table already. So the best way to find your answer or solution is to do graph. Personally, I feel graph and table is always the easiest way to work on linear function. And since we're already given table, so it's easier for us to plot the point on the graph and figure it out the answer. So on the table, they give you T represent for the hours, and G represent for the number of gallons of gas remaining in his gas tank. So we can label T as X and G as Y. So I already plot these points, and for those of you who are a little bit confused how you're gonna plot it on the graph, so then for each of the value of X and each of the value of Y, when you pair them up together, they give you a point on the graph. And for example, 2.5 for T and 9.5 for G. That means this pair will give you a point on the graph as 2.5 comma 9.5. Okay, and now you plot them of X and Y. So we have X-axis here and Y-axis here. So 2.5 on X will be 2.5 will be between 2 and 3. So somewhere right here. And then 9.5 on the Y will be between 9 and 10. So somewhere right here. So if you try to trace them like this, you see they cut at one point right here. This is the point. Okay, so that's the first point. And then the second point, so assume that we don't see the line right now because I know that my line may not be accurate without the XY grid. So that's why I try to do it ahead. But assume you don't see the line right now. So we try to figure out the point first. And then the next point on the graph will come from X is 4 and Y is 8. So we have the coordinates are 4, 8. So 4 on X and 8 on Y. So again, doing the same thing, you're tracing them until they meet up at one point on the graph. So this is the next point. And then last point we have is 6, 6. So now 6 on X and 6 on Y. Okay, so now you have 3 points on the graph. You connect all of them together and you see the line go through all 3 points. If you graph the line and one of them is not on the line, one of the points is not on the line, that means we did something wrong. Since we call it linear function, therefore we expect to see a straight line when you connect all the points from the table. Alright, and then now the question is would have remained after driving 5.5 hours. So we can figure it out the answer or the amount of gas Jackson would have remaining after driving for 5.5 hours by working on the graph right here. So we were looking for X is the hours. We're looking for 5.5 hours, which is between 5 and 6. It's right here. If you're looking for it, you will find a point on the graph. And with this point right here, you can figure it out the amount of gas, which is the Y value. And then we find out is 6.5. Okay, so yes, the answer right here based on the graph, our answer is So after driving, should rewrite it, 5.5 hours, Jackson will have 6.5 gallons of gas okay for the remaining. Alright, that's how we write the answer in 4 sentences. Okay, so that's how you use a graph to solve this problem. Now we move on. The other method to solve this problem is we come up with the equation. And for the equation, we will reuse the table one more time because that's the information we are given from the problem. So now from the table we have T and G. Then we have 2.5, 9.5, and we have 4, 8, 6, and 6. Okay. So from the table, in order to find the equation, we have to think of the equation for linear function, and I do expect you guys know it, which is in the slope-intercept form. So we call it y equals mx plus b. Okay. So that means m represents for the slope. What is the slope? So slope will be change in y over change in x. Okay, and then b represents for initial value or starting value. Alright, so there's many ways to find slope and initial value. We can find it using the formula, but I want you to base on your understanding. So then for the change in y and change in x, we can do this way instead using the formula. So I do show you the formula later, but right now I just want you to do it based on your understanding first. So go back to the table. So then if we want to find change in y for each time, so then let's see from the first one to the second one, what is the change in y? So the change is actually the difference between them. So the difference will be subtract 1.5, because from 9.5 go to 8, we subtract 1.5, right? And then from 8 to 6, what is the change from 8 to 6? And it will be subtract 2. Okay, that's totally fine. Okay, so now we go to the x column and see what is the change in x. So again, what is the difference, or what is the change from 2.5 to 4? So from 2.5 and we get to 4, we think of addition, so it will be add 1.5. All right, and then from 4 to 6, we add 2. So you see that I use different color for each time I do the change in y or change in x. Why is that? Because when you calculating the slope or the change in y over the change in x, you need to use the same set of coordinates. So what do I mean by that? So then if I want to use the change in y from 9.5 to 8, okay, so that means I will use negative 1.5. And that means I have to use the change in x from 2.5 to 4. I cannot use 4 to 6 for the change in x if I use the change in y as negative 1.5. Does it make sense? So green have to go with green, red have to go with red. We have to use the same set of number. Okay. So then for the green one, I'm using 2.5, 9.5, and 4, 8. Then my slope or the change in y over the change in x will be negative 1.5 over 1.5. Okay, and that will give me negative 1. All right, but then I also want to prove to you guys that no matter which point you pick from the table, or which pair you pick from the table, you should end up with the same slope if you do it right. So now the next pair I can use, so when you work on it, you only need to use one of them. But if you want to double check your work, you can use different pairs to double check to make sure you end up with the same slope. So then I want to double check my work, so therefore I use different pairs now. So I'm using 4, 8 and 6, 6 instead of 2.5, 9.5 and 4, 8. So if I use 4, 8 and 6, 6, my slope right now is change in y over change in x. So the formula still the same, stay the same. And then change in y right now for the red is negative 2. You see that? Negative 2 right here is not negative 1.5 anymore. And then the change in x now is 2 also. It's not 1.5 anymore. But at the end, negative 2 divided by 2 is also give you negative 1. Yeah, so the slope is negative 1. Okay. Alright, so now I can use the formula, which is y equals, and the slope now I will take the slope right here and then replace it for the m, which is slope. So then instead of m, I have negative 1 and then x plus b. So next step I need to do is I have to find b value. So I also noticed that the xy right here means I can pick any point from the table to replace x and y for this equation. Okay, remember that's we have when we rewrite as coordinates, we have x and y. So you can pick any of them and plug into this x and y. So I will pick 4 and 8. So if I pick 4 and 8, then my y will be 8. Okay, so my y will be 8 equals negative 1 times my x will be 4. And then plus b. And I have to solve for b from here. So then I will have 8 equals negative 4 plus b. In order to solve for b, I add 4 on both sides. And then my b now equals 12. So b equals 12. And then next, I will go back to my equation and rewrite everything again. So I have y equals negative 1x, and instead of b, I will have plus 12. Okay, and then I go back to the beginning from the table, and I notice that I'm not using x and y right now. X and y is just the parent graph or the original variable we use. However, for this situation, we should understand x as t and y as g. So then now I will replace it a little bit. So my y now becomes g equals -1, and my x becomes t, and then plus 12. And then next, I will answer the questions from the problem. Determine how many gallons of gas Jackson would have remaining after driving for 5.5 hours. So then I do have the time, which is 5.5 hours. What I do is I take g equals -1, and my t now is 5.5 plus 12. And I evaluate it from here. So g equals -5.5 plus 12, and g equals 6.5 gallons of gas. Okay, and you notice that this answer matched to the answer I have from the graph. So either way you do, you should end up with the same answer. And you see that I just proved to you for this problem, graphing is the best method to use because it's way easier and way shorter compared to the equation. But either way you choose, pick the one that you feel the most comfortable to solve this problem. Alright, hopefully this video helped you guys understand how to find the output when you are given the input and the table.